Hey, what's up everybody? So today we got another update. Despite Valve saying that this would be the last major update, we got a small little update today that does have some pretty impactful changes, so let's go over it together. I'm going to be reading some of the patch notes and showcasing some stuff in game at the same time. If you just want to check out the patch notes, there's going to be a link in the description below. The first two lines are talking about slows. So fix some cases where slows could cause your speed to fall below 2 meters per second, and fix slow percentage calculations being based off assuming minimum speed is 0 rather than 2. This is just a nerf to slows. However, slows are still going to be very strong, but you may have been in situations in the past where you felt like you literally could not move because you were too slowed. And so this should fix those situations and you should still be able to move, although very slowly. Tier 4 items cost reduced from 6.2k to 6k. So a little bit of history on this change. Back in May, when I first started being in the playtest, Tier 4 items cost 6.5k. And so now over the months have gone from 6.5k to 6k, and the trend has always been that the cost is reducing. I believe that the main reason for reducing the cost is how strong 500 cost items are. And in general, a lot of builds just seem to love like stacking up a bunch of 500 cost items and then maybe getting 1 or 2 tier 4 items later on in the game. They're always very slot efficient, but you know, as far as their relative power per soul spent, it felt like you were getting a little bit punished compared to cheaper items. And so I think that they're just trying to make it so that it's a little bit more viable to go for those power spikes on tier 4 items a little bit earlier. I personally like this change. I'm curious to see how it will play out. Shield duration to not take damage before regenerating increased from 18 seconds to 30 seconds. So before, if you had a shield and it wasn't fully depleted, if you didn't take damage for 18 seconds of that type, it would fully regen. So let's say you had a spirit shield in lane. If you didn't take spirit damage for 18 seconds, it would just go back to full. This meant that shields were very, very strong at taking trades in lane. And one meta that had developed pretty much in North America and Europe to an extent at a high level was rushing barriers, shields, as the first item in the lane. So for example, you could go combat barrier first item, and then you could take an extended trade. Let's say you would trade 200 damage with your opponent, and then you would just hide for 18 seconds, and then your barrier would regen to full, meaning that you're 200 health up on your opponent just from the fact that you bought a barrier as the first item and your opponent didn't. This was kind of a little bit silly, and I definitely don't think that this was an intended use case for barriers. And so I think they're adjusting that so that, you know, this is not as possible as it was before. Fix ethereal shift not canceling abilities like flight. So let's see what that means. So as you can see, if I'm in flight here and I use E-shift, all of a sudden I'm going to start falling down. So before, Vindicta could use E-shift and just maintain her flight, and this was effectively like just made knockdown not that useful against her. You would buy knockdown, she would buy E-shift, it would be nullified, and then if you had a second knockdown, she would simply buy debuff remover like this, and then it would also be nullified, meaning you'd need like 3 knockdowns pretty much to get her out of the sky. Which felt a little bit silly, and so I think that this adjustment is going to make it so Vindicta feels a lot more balanced than she did. I think she was, you know, quite overpowered in the current state, and so this should help her bring her in line with other heroes. Although it does not explicitly say so in the patch notes, ethereal shift canceling abilities also means that in Furnace's flame dash gets canceled by E-shift. So in the past, you could E-shift, you could flame dash and then E-shift, and your flame dash would kind of keep going at a very slow pace, and now it fully cancels it. So this is also a nerf to the dash and Furnace build slightly. Fixed various bugs with Arcane Surge. And so I believe that the bugs with Arcane Surge might have been that it wasn't working on certain abilities, or there was some weird stuff going on. So hopefully there's no more bugs. As always, if you yourself find bugs with Arcane Surge, make sure to report it on the forums, or let me know in my own Discord so that I can report it myself. Take gold increased from 2% to 1% to 2.5, 1.5. So I think that they felt that the take gold was just kind of like insignificant. It's funny that they used the term gold here because they always use souls, but I think since this patch was probably made with limited staff, a little bit, some mistakes slipped through. Restorative shot, slight nerf. The cooldown was increased by 1 second. I think this item was just like really, really strong, and you would buy it in almost every single lane. So I like the fact that they nerfed it a little bit, and in general, I'm a fan of nerfing healing in lane because I think that laning should be a little bit more calculated than it is right now. Spellslinger headshot cooldown is now on a per target basis rather than on the item. This means that you can headshot a bunch of different people, and the cooldown is just like, okay, you can't headshot this person 100 times in 1 second. You have to do it on different people. This is effectively a buff, as well as the spirit amp per headshot was increased by 1%. I believe that these changes should be enough to the point that we now see Spellslinger headshot being bought more often. We'll see though, and we'll see if people get creative with it. Knockdown stun duration reduced from 0.75 seconds to 0.5 seconds for ground targets. Airborne values adjusted to be similar to before. So I believe that what this means is that they intend knockdown to be an anti-air counter mostly, right? So for characters like Lash, for characters like Vindicta, Grey Talon, etc. And they don't really mean knockdown to be a source of CC for ground targets, more so a source of interrupt. So if you need something to interrupt like a channel, like a Dynamo or Morn Curl, knockdown is still a viable option, but the stun element of it is now very, very short at 0.5 seconds. Just a reminder, this used to be, I believe, 1.25 seconds. A few months back. So it's just been nerfed and nerfed over and over again, which I think is a good thing, because like being CC chained by knockdown is not fun when the enemy team has 3 or 4. And so I think that this is a good change. Here is the big change of the patch. Veilwalker is now a tier 4 item. Shields increased from 250 to 300. Invisibility and duration increased from 5 to 7 seconds. And the initial fade out time reduced from 1 second to the previous 0.25. So basically, they reverted some nerfs that they made to Veilwalker. They gave it 300 shields. You can now be invisible a little bit longer, and the fade out time is back to what it was. But very little buffs, to be honest, to Veilwalker. And now it costs double the cost exactly. It went from 3k to now 6k, because tier 4s now cost 6k instead of 6.2k. I believe that this is obviously a huge nerf to Veilwalker. I personally like this change because I think that invisibility is incredibly strong in this game, as well as shields were really, really strong. And invisibility has no footsteps. It's just a really strong stat, and I think it being it being accessible on a 3000 item was a little bit unhealthy for the game. Overall, I'm curious to see if this item will be bought at all. I think it'll probably still see some play, but I think at first nobody's going to buy it because people are going to be like really doomer about it. But I guess we'll see. Alchemical Fire base DPS reduced from 55 to 50. Honestly, I don't think this will change much. The main reason that this item is bought so much is because of the stats that it offers, as well as the additional damage it gives you. It gives you like additional weapon damage against the structures, against mid-boss, against heroes. Just a very strong utility item to have on your team. Allows you to do mid-boss insanely quickly, which really changes the pace of the game. Infernus Flame Dash charge time increased by 3 seconds. This will make it so that the time between charges is slightly longer. Overall, a good change. I don't think Infernus is particularly OP right now, but I know a lot of people are struggling with the dash build. Mirage Fire Scarabs T2 reduced from -10 to -8. Just a slight Mirage nerf. I think Mirage was probably OP, especially in the hands of really good players at the top level, so a slight nerf is totally fine by me. Vindicta changes. Assassinate base damage reduced from 120 to 100, and the bonus damage also reduced by 20, so effectively 40 less damage. The scaling will be the same, so I don't think this is a huge Vindicta nerf, but it might be enough to bring her in line with other heroes, but I guess we'll see. That combined with the E-Shift change, I expect Vindicta to still see some play, but not be as oppressive as she was. Warden Bullet damage growth was reduced from 0.94 to 0.9, and Warden's Last Stand now does 40% less damage to objective, similar to various other abilities. So I think that they just don't want Warden to be able to kind of just run down a walker with his ultimate by himself and kind of suicide for it, which was quite common in the previous patch. So now it'll be a little bit harder to do that. And finally, the last change, Yamato Shadow Transformation resist reduced by 5%, and the T3 gained 5% more. So this is just delaying a bit of her power and giving her a little bit less power early, but giving it back to her a little bit later on. Just to show you guys the new Veilwalker, this is what it looks like, and this is how long the buff duration lasts once you go through the veil. So as you can see, you're invisible for quite a long time, and especially if you get like duration extender and stuff, your invisibility is going to last a while. And so I think it'll be like a really useful mobility tool if you want it, but it does make shield builds like significantly worse, because before all you'd have to do is you'd buy both barriers, combat and enchanters, and then you just needed 3k to get Veilwalker, and then you could simply go through a veil, refresh all your shields, and have an incredible amount of EHP in the mid game. And now you're not really going to be able to do that anymore. You're going to need to spend 6k if you want to refresh your shields, and essentially if you want to go like a shield build, you're going to need Veilwalker, right? And so I think that this will affect the current meta very significantly, and I'm curious to see how it plays out. I personally really like the changes that are in this patch. It's just a hotfix. It's not a big balance patch or anything. As they said, there wouldn't be big balance patches left in the year, but I think it was a well-needed hotfix. Let me know what you guys think about the update in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.